Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/securityweekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/ESW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Skeleton keys, golden tickets, forged packs, DC sync, DC shadow. The Active Directory attack surface is expanding faster than admins can keep up with. Securing your environment begins with implementing least privilege administrative models, but does not end there. Many organizations send Active Directory syslog events to a SIM platform. However, logs are noisy, of limited scope, and are time-consuming to review and act upon. Active Directory is secure when it's clean, understood, configured properly, monitored closely, and controlled tightly. StealthBits technology provide solutions that monitor, secure, and detect the latest threats against Active Directory. Visit them today at stealthbits.com to learn more.
All right, and we are back, and Paul left me with a whole bunch of stories to go over today, so let's go ahead and let's get started. I won't be able to get to absolutely every one of them, but I have a few choice ones that I picked out. The first one I want to talk about is the Coalfire article, and it talks about PCI DSS 3.1.2, what you need to know. And basically what you need to know is you shouldn't be using SSL, you should be using the newest version of TLS, unless you're using SSL, at which point you have a grandfather phase where you can continue to use SSL as long as you prove that there's no risk associated with SSL or early versions of TLS, and if there's a new vulnerability, then you must stop using earlier versions of TLS and SSL completely. This is insane. Okay, so whenever we're talking about security, it's funny how there's a lot of conversations about underlying crypto, and these conversations are in fact very, very, very important, but we get into really kind of an important series of conversations about, is it as important as other things, or are we kind of getting wrapped around the axles? First, if we're looking at SSL and TLS, you're looking at a number of attacks, including attacks like Beast, where you can basically insert JavaScript and then basically start decrypting SSL traffic and so on. And that is important because it's actually showing a fundamental flaw in one of the key components that we use for trying to secure all of our communications over the internet in transit. And I believe fundamentally that that is key. So if you're using these older protocols, you should be trying to get rid of them as quickly as you possibly can. However, what this is actually showing, especially when we're looking at PCI DSS, is we're looking at a tremendous amount of complexity that is now coming to play with organizations that are trying to stay compliant. It's no longer clear-cut guidance and saying, thou shall use this, thou shall use that. And I see this ultimately as somewhat of a failing of PCI DSS because they're starting to get into weird minutia and weird gyrations in the technical implementation. So a good compliance framework, if it's done correctly, should have a high-level goal and objective, like your systems should be patched. That is something that you should always be shooting towards at all times, whether you're dealing with NIST, whether you're dealing with the critical controls, whether you're dealing with ISO, whether you're dealing with Sarbanes-Oxley or HIPAA. The idea of patching is something that is clean. It makes a lot of sense. There's no ambiguity. Do it. And when we're talking about encryption protocols and we're talking about things like SSL and TLS, the same thing also applies if we're talking about patching. You should be trying to use the newest protocols that have the fewest vulnerabilities in them at all times. However, whenever you have a guide that now all of a sudden is starting to get into very specific versions of SSL and TLS, and it's starting to split hairs, it's actually starting to confuse the overall message associated with that compliance framework. So imagine if we said that all of your systems should be patched, and then all of a sudden they start breaking down and saying, well, unless you have systems that you can't patch. Like if you're using an AS400 and you can't patch it because the patches aren't actually available because they haven't released any patches for the specific application that you're using, because that application that you're using, the company that wrote it is now out of business, it's okay as long as you have a certain number of firewalls in place to try to protect that particular system. It starts creating this spaghetti mess of all these different rabbit holes that you can now go on down in information security, and it's not actually providing clear guidance. So if we're looking at something like SSL and TLS, you should be using the most recent version, or the newest versions of TLS. Almost everything below that is broken. How broken is it actually? Is it broken to the point where anybody can sniff and intercept and actually pull out clear text? No, it's not there. So the risk associated with this type of hijacking and interception attack is actually pretty low. Is this something that PCI DSS actually needed to get involved in and start providing detailed guidance? I personally disagree. They should have just basically said you're using the most up-to-date versions of encryption that are used for data in transit, and don't use anything that has any vulnerabilities in it. Leave it alone at that. That way it actually stays clear as the guidance continues to move forward over the next few years, as we see SSL and TLS continue to fade, or earlier versions of TLS start to fade out. So try to get away from that ambiguity, because that ambiguity is going to create a tremendous amount of problems for security teams. So I guess what I'm getting at for those of you that in the enterprises today, good luck. This is going to suck, because this just basically gave ammunition to a lot of your systems administrators to continue using these weaker, older protocols in perpetuity. So where they tried to create clarification, they actually created a series of ops for people to opt out from implementing, and a series of excuses for them to not implement this guidance more readily and available in organizations in a timely fashion. Next one is global patch management software. So this is kind of interesting. This is a wonderful little website where they go through and they have a number of reports and they talk about different technologies, and there's a number of vendors that are mentioned here. From Manage Engine GFI, which has been around a really long time, Automox, and SolarWinds. Why does this matter? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I've been traveling quite a bit, and I've still, it's weird, but years into my career, I'm still seeing a lot of organizations that their entire patch process is basically built around what Microsoft is automatically doing for them. And that just isn't a really good approach at all for trying to deal with patch management. You really do need a third-party product to actually adequately manage the patches in your organization. And watching that for the non-Microsoft third-party applications that your organizations are running constantly. And this becomes a theme at Black Hills Information Security, and the fact that we actually actively exploit these third-party applications because they don't get the love, care, and feeding that your standard Microsoft suite of products would actually have in place. So having these products is essential, because right now there isn't a good open source solution for you to actually do this third-party patch management. Now, why does it matter? Well, imagine that we go back, let's say, 15 years. If you go back 15 to maybe even 18 years ago, you look at the number of applications that your desktop had. Your standard desktop image when help desk or desktop support built your desktop image for your workstations. There was probably 5 or 6 core apps that were used by the individuals that worked at your organization at that time, maybe 10, right? You would have your Office suite of tools, and then you maybe have a timesheet tracking tool, and then maybe you would have some type of like financial management or mortgage management if you're in the mortgage industry. You'd have a specific app for your business and what your business does. However, as time goes on, you keep on adding more and more software. And if we allow users administrator privileges, as many organizations do allow their users to have administrator privileges, then users continue to add more software into their overall stack on their workstation. Developers are a good example of a group of people that continue to add more and more software. As time goes on, the amount of software that you have in your organization continues to expand, and you end up with more and more software. So I've mentioned this before. Imagine it like a snowball, except it's a great big snowball of crap. And every year it rotates around, you add more software in your organization, and you don't shed software from your organization. So when we're doing hunts in organizations, a tremendous amount of time where we do long tail analysis, where we stack up all the software that's installed. And we aren't going to look so much right away at the systems that have the software packages that's installed on 100% of the systems in your organization. We're going to start looking at the long tail, the systems that have software that's installed on one computer system or two systems. That would be like the onesie, twosie softwares. Most of the time when we're looking at that long tail, the software that's installed on the fewest workstations, we run into incredibly out of date, incredibly old software that honestly should not be there and opens up the organization to a large amount of risk. When you're using these products, where you're talking about Manage Engine or GFI or SolarWinds, that can go through and audit your workstations, see what software is installed on your workstations, and bring it to your intention that you have certain software platforms that are incredibly out of date and way behind on patches, or maybe there's no patches available, there's just exploits available and patch was never released because the company went out of business. That gives you visibility into your endpoints in a way that most organizations are not doing, or at least not doing effectively. This also feeds into your change management process. Basically, how is software being introduced? Is it authorized software? And then finally, software inventory. If we're talking about the SANS 20 critical controls, that's control 1 or 2. They're both inventory of hardware, one's inventory of software. So these software programs for going through and doing that third-party patch management are a key component in any architecture for software inventory, finding out-of-date ancient software that shouldn't be there, and giving you visibility as far as what software can actually be removed from your organization. As far as which one's the best, honestly, I just don't care. The one that we see the most is Manage Engine. I say this a lot on the show. I hear these products and these vendors come up and they say that they're a global leader. I've never heard of them. I don't see them in our assessments, and we do 250 to 300 assessments a year. Manage Engine is one that we do see. We also do see GFI, and we do see SolarWinds. As far as having an opinion, honestly, I don't have one. It's good whenever they're in play. I can't really say that there's one that's better than another, but you do need to have them in play. Next up, we're going to move on and talk about GDPR, General Data Privacy Requirements in Europe, or the other way I like to call it, it's an information security jobs program for the next 10 to 15 years. Now, it's interesting how everyone is panicking, and I don't think I've seen this much panic in information security since like 08-06-07, to be honest with you. The reason why people are panicking is we don't have solid guidance as far as what compliant with GDPR actually is, even though it's really not a compliance framework, but whatever. But it is an accountability framework. And what it's basically saying is if your organization is compromised and the private data of citizens in Europe is compromised, they can actually levy fines against your organization. It has penalties for organizations that get compromised. So what have we seen over the past few months? We have seen the EULAs, terms and conditions for privacy statements, have been updated for almost every single service that I use, from Twitter to Google, to LinkedIn, to Facebook. They've updated their service to make sure that they're somewhat GDPR compliant. We're also seeing a huge push for some organizations like Facebook to move a large number of their users out of the EU zone and into other zones, to kind of sidestep GDPR completely. And that's not going to be a strategy that's going to be winning for any kind of long-term approach. Now, one of the things that I think has been woefully ignored whenever we're talking about GDPR is the importance of user awareness training. And that's really where the next article comes into play with Wombat and their GDPR training module. And I know at SANS Securing the Human, they're also developing a GDPR training module as well. This is going to be key, because if we're looking at trying to protect your organization from getting compromised, if we don't actually get the human element under control and get that human element under control quickly, we're going to continue to have massive data breaches. I mean, if we're looking at data breaches, I think it's now down to 75% of the breaches that occur are basically user attacks, where they're doing it through social engineering or spear phishing. It doesn't matter what your external policy is. It doesn't matter what version of SSL or TLS you're using. If your users are still clicking links and those systems can be compromised, and then attackers can move laterally in your organization, you very likely are going to have some very large fines in relation to GDPR in your organization. So that user awareness training is going to be absolutely essential. And a couple of key components when you're looking at user awareness training. One, with your user awareness training, is it just a series of CBTs that people go through and then answer questions at the end? If that's all it is, and you do it like once a year, your user awareness training program is garbage. Is it something that can be constantly reinforced with different modules and updates and newsletters, spear phishing exercises, social engineering exercises to constantly reinforce the lessons of that user awareness training? Well, now all of a sudden, we are dealing with something that actually does have value. Because just like vulnerability assessments, where you're constantly looking for vulnerabilities, patching vulnerabilities, updating systems, starting over, doing it again, you have to do the exact same thing with user awareness training. You're going to assess your users, do user awareness training, then reassess your users, put them back into more user awareness training if they failed, and keep that as a continuous process in your organization. Just hold on a second. I don't know if they actually heard me. Now, in addition to GDPR compliance, it's interesting, F-Secure is basically launching their new endpoint detection and response, or EDR solution, to try to tie in to GDPR. Now, GDPR, there's a lot of components to it, but two main things, right? If you get compromised, you can be financially held accountable for the incident. Also, how you react to that incident makes a huge difference in the level of fines that'll be levied against you. And that's really where F-Secure is actually coming into this market space. It's not just trying to sell a product. It's trying to sell a product and coupling that product with services. So if you have a compromise, you have a product that will allow you to effectively identify that particular compromise quickly, and they have people on staff that can actually assist you in working through that. That's trying to close that gap between initial detection of a compromise and the time that it takes for you to react. The overall point being with GDPR, if you find you're compromised and you react very quickly, let's say within an hour, and the overall damage to any personally identifiable information it's leaked is very mitigated, you're probably not going to have that much weight in a fine. However, if your organization is compromised and it takes your organization months to actually detect that you were compromised and absolutely everything is now dumped out, let's just use Equifax as a great example, everything is dumped online and the adversaries have it, well, now you're probably going to be looking at some very, very substantial fines associated with that particular breach. Now, a couple quick notes on this. One, it's interesting to me how many of the security products are taking their existing solutions and they're trying to mold them or pigeonhole them to be GDPR compliant. Now, that's great. I have nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that that's fantastic. But if we take a step back and we are no longer looking at products for detecting the attack at the endpoint, if we look at the Facebook Cambridge Analytica breach, that was not a hack of Facebook's endpoints. That was not a hack of a server getting root and stealing data off of the database, but it was actually an attack against the underlying business logic of the way ads were being loaded and different surveys and quizzes were being loaded in Facebook and taking advantage of that business logic. So please understand that when we're talking about GDPR compliance, it is not just about purchasing a product, implementing that product, or even doing automation testing like I talked about with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. It's going to require your organization to also do business logic testing of your core business components to make sure that an individual user cannot get access to one of your platforms and then pull a tremendous amount of sensitive data off of that platform. So this is why that continued self-assessment, doing red teams against your own organization and having third parties come in is going to continue to be very, very, very important, because not absolutely everything can be automated in the form of red team, and not absolutely everything comes back to an endpoint. So this is great that F-Secure is providing GDPR in their EDR solution and also providing support for people whenever they do believe that they're compromised. But we also need to look a little bit beyond that as well. The next article, I think, is my absolute favorite of all of the different articles that we have today. It's from Gadgets Now. It's McAfee is developing security solutions for digital wallets. Now, why is this one of my favorite ads or one of my favorite stories for today? Reason why this is one of my favorite stories is, as I've been traveling, I'm just going to use Canada as an example, the way the world is actually shifting in relation to computer security, privacy, and let's just talk about cryptocurrency or digital currency, make it more broad, let's just talk about digital currency, is wildly different from country to country to country. In the United States, I have a lot of people that are interested in buying Bitcoin, but they're usually looking at it from a financial investment perspective, or they end up buying Bitcoin from the perspective of, oops, I've been compromised, all of my sensitive data is now encrypted, and I need to pay it to get my sensitive data off my computer system for ransomware. However, if you travel around, the whole view of cryptocurrency is fundamentally different. Up in Canada, I think whenever I was in Toronto, I actually saw ATM machines for Bitcoin. Like you could literally go up to an ATM machine and you could purchase Bitcoin at that ATM. Now that's fascinating to me, right? We don't see that in the United States. Also, in the United States, you have like digital wallets, right? Like you have Google Pay and you have Apple Pay that you can use your phone to actually purchase things at point of sale terminals. By and large, in most parts of the United States, not all, but in most parts of the United States, that has not really taken off. Right? So because it hasn't really taken off, and just being focused on the United States for just a few more minutes, that means that a lot of the security solutions that are in play for protecting your digital wallet for your digital currency probably haven't been vetted as well as they possibly could be. Now, what's interesting about this story with McAfee actually getting into security solutions for digital wallets is the fact that this entire article is dedicated to talking about India. And it talks about India in kind of how they're moving towards digital currency. So one of the quotes in here, India has a large number of wallets when compared to other countries. That means that there's multiple different applications that you can use as an end user to store your digital currency in your digital wallets. And they're seeing this continue to expand. And also in moving into Southeast Asia as well. Now, what's interesting about this is not a big deal in the United States yet, but now we're seeing this ramp up in India. And if you read this entire article, they talk about how digital payments is going to be moving to $1 trillion in India alone by 2023. So this is actually taking off very, very, very quickly. And I bring this to your attention because if we're talking about enterprise security, right, it's not just about looking at the current threats that your organization is dealing with today. And it's important to understand that most of the time whenever we're talking about threats that organizations are faced with today, a lot of that news story and that hype cycle is actually generated by the vendors. The vendors say they have a solution for a particular attack tactic X. Most of the time, whenever they talk about that particular technique or that particular approach that attacks are taking and the products that they have, a lot of the products that they're bringing to the market right now today that are cutting edge are actually dealing with attacks that are 2 to 3 years old. That's just because that's the product development life cycle from the initial time that you talk about a gap where a product can fill, the amount of time it takes to develop that product and bring that product to market. So if you're talking about looking forward into the future, it's not about talking about what products are available right now, but looking over the curve and looking at what technologies actually exist. So if we're looking at right now the digital wallets, is your organization actually going to have digital wallets? What policies does your organization have for securing digital wallets? Do you have digital wallets right now? Are you sure you don't have digital wallets right now? Because it's entirely possible that you may in different parts of your organization. So if we want to be forward-looking as an enterprise, it's going to require us to look at these emerging technologies that are just now starting to catch right now at this moment, being familiar with those technologies, and then also what types of security problems exist with those technologies. And that's one of the reasons why Bo and Mike, or You Stay Ready and Daft Hack from Black Hills Information Security, started up a podcast dedicated to digital currency with their CoinSec podcast, because they're looking at blockchains, they're looking at contracts, they're looking at how these different things work in cryptocurrency, because as much as we'd like to poo-poo these technologies like digital wallets and cryptocurrencies and blockchain, they are in fact going to be implemented in our technology stacks in the next 5 to 10 years. And we need to be aware of what those different technologies are, and we need to be up on them so we're ready for them to eventually come out. Next one, I really like this one, mainly because this idea of microsegmentation, even though I think it is a little bit buzzwordy, is important, because the vast majority of organizations, and I'll just talk about what this article is AngloSec announces new log analysis microsegmentation app for Palo Alto Networks application framework. And really what AngloSec actually is it's basically a firewall rule maintenance application. And the reason why I think that this is important is I like to talk about how information security is very quickly breaking into first world, second world, and third world organizations, where we aren't seeing security as a whole continue to progress and everybody is, all ships are rising together. That is absolutely not happening. Instead, what we're seeing is where some organizations are developing and implementing a tremendous, amazing technology stack, from EDR to advanced artificial intelligence endpoint security suites to augment their blacklist. They're doing segmentation down to the workstations and the firewalls and enabling those. They're implementing cyber deception. They're implementing user behavioral and entity analytics in their SIMs. All of these different technologies are in play. That's your first world organizations, and there's not very many of them. And a whole bunch of the other organizations have a tremendous backlog of technology that they need to implement. And in fact, many times they're still running like Windows 2000 on their web server infrastructure. So that's just how bad it actually is when looking at the separation of technologies. Now, when you're talking about second world, first world, third world countries, it's interesting because when we're talking about real technology stacks, there's a lot of times there's leapfrog technologies. So for example, if you go to a third world country a few years ago, they didn't have telephone lines at all. And that would be considered to be key infrastructure for any developing or emerging or first world country. Whereas a lot of countries actually in the third world, they actually did a leapfrog over the past 10 to 15 years. They implemented cell phone technologies across their entire organization that compete and rival first world countries. And in many situations, they have much better technology infrastructure in their cell phone technology. And they actually leapfrogged over different technologies completely. The same can also play whenever you're talking about your IT infrastructure. So for years, we've been talking about segmenting your different network components into separate VLANs. Like you would have a VLAN for your Internet of Things. You would have a VLAN for your physical security systems. You would have a VLAN for your security analytics platforms and your security tools, a VLAN for network management, and so on. But doing that type of technologies and doing that type of segmentation, if you're an organization that used to be a completely flat network with no segmentation whatsoever, trying to go through those different phases can be extremely difficult and hard to do. So when we're looking at tools like Palo Alto, the application frameworks, and microsegmentation, it allows an organization to kind of leapfrog. So instead of trying to do full segmentation to different VLANs, private VLANs, and so on, it now allows you to do that microsegmentation by applications. It still requires love, care, and feeding for your organization. But now you have firewall and firewall management products that can say, well, these two particular IP addresses are the only two that ever communicate over syslog or whatever protocol is being used. It learns over time, yep, this is the same thing again and again and again and again and again. We're setting up a rule that these are the only two things that can talk to each other. And that scares the absolute, just bejesus out of me for a number of reasons. Anytime you're talking about any type of automation of firewall rule sets, it opens up the possibility of all kinds of different disruption in an organization. And these products do a pretty good job of actually jumping past that disruption and trying to do their best to stop it. But then there's also a large amount of ways to sidestep these different technologies and attack them. But it is, at the bare minimum, a leapfrog technology. It allows you to go past the whole entire physically and logically separating all of your different network segments, which I still think is the best approach, and you should absolutely do that. But it gives organizations that are trying to get into a higher security tier another approach, another tool set to actually implement in that organization without having to go through all the intermediary technologies to actually get there. Now, to be honest, this still requires a tremendous amount of love, care, and feeding. It's going to require someone who knows what they're doing. If not initially to set it up, but when something goes wrong, you're going to absolutely want someone who knows what they're doing to know how to go through and tune these products so far as like microsegmentation down to the application flow in your organization. So I think it's a great idea. It's awesome. Let's start using more of these technologies, but I really wish that they were more spread out across the industry as a whole and not just at the kind of chosen few. So with that, that is the stories for Enterprise Security Weekly, I think episode 92. So we're going to take a quick break, come back with some advertisements, and wrap it up. Thank you so much, everybody.
Are you looking for high-performance data storage that's easy to use yet secure enough for the Department of Defense? Look no further. Racktop Systems gives business software-defined data storage complete with embedded compliance, security, and data encryption. Don't let cyber threats, regulatory demands, or the complexity and growth of your data overwhelm your business. Racktop's high-performance data management platform gives you the tools you need to address the most demanding data challenges. Think beyond storage. To learn more, visit racktopsystems.com. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observit combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at observit.com/Security Weekly. IT Pro TV, binge-worthy learning for IT teams. Why is it binge-worthy? It's learning presented in an engaging and entertaining talk show format that beats voice-over PowerPoint snooze fests. Watch over 3,300 hours of content in their on-demand library, on your desktop, on the go, or in the comfort of your own living room. IT Pro TV is IT training you and your team actually want to watch, which means a better return on your learning investment. Get started with IT Pro TV for Teams by visiting itpro.tv/Security Weekly and start a 7-day free trial and get 30% off standard or premium IT Pro TV memberships using the code SECWeekly30.